The Amiens Branch Railway in the Granite Belt in southeast Queensland transported fruit and other produce from the soldier settlement, which had been established after World War I, to the main line at Cottonvale, thence the Brisbane markets. The trains ran from June 7, 1920 to February the 28th, 1974. This is the story of the fruit train.
In February 1916, a conference of representatives from both the Commonwealth and the States was held to consider a report prepared by the Federal Parliamentary War Committee regarding the settlement of returned soldiers on the land. The meeting agreed that the Commonwealth Government should select and acquire land, and that the state government authorities would process applications and grant land allotments. As the war was drawing to a close, the Australian government passed the Discharged Soldiers Settlement Act in 1917, and the idea of returned soldiers being re-established and resettled on the land was formalised. Surveyor Jack Meek, a returned soldier himself, was involved in the survey for the soldier settlement planned for Queensland's Granite Belt, where the climate favoured the growing of apples, pears and stone fruit.
On returning in 1919 from service in France, I looked around for survey work. Eventually my luck changed. I was delighted to learn that my instructions were for a large subdivisional survey for soldiers' settlement in the Granite Belt. The soldiers' settlement scheme had first been proposed by the federal government in 1915 to plan ahead for the end of the war, when returning soldiers would be seeking employment. The idea of giving them work on the land, which would be useful, productive and hopefully prove a healthy lifestyle, seemed a good one.
While waiting for their fruit trees to bear, the soldier settlers grew vegetables for market. Most farmers had only a horse and dray to transport their produce along the rough tracks through the bush to the main line at Thalimba or Dalveen, where it was loaded on the train to Brisbane. The produce was often badly bruised by the bumpy journey, resulting in a poor price at market. An alternative was urgently needed. A petition, dated April 1918, organised by Francis Bull, read:
To the President and members of the Legislative Council of the Parliament of Queensland, in Parliament assembled, we, the undersigned residents of the Carnarvon electorate, do humbly request that a survey be carried out to select the most suitable route for a tram line to be built to serve the soldier settlement at the 13 Mile.
The 13 Mile settlement, later to be renamed Amiens, comprised a few small wooden buildings and a camp for the gang who were clearing land for the soldier settlement. Soldier settlers' farms were scattered through the country back towards Cottonvale, and the families living on the settlement were without services of any kind.
We formed the Bentinck Tramway League, and they made me their secretary. As a result of another petition with more than 100 signatures, A.J. Crowther, the Secretary of Railways, assigned Surveyor MacArthur to study the proposed routes.
In July of 1918, I met with the representatives of the Bentinck Tramway League, who have requested a tramway to be built to serve the soldier settlement presently known as 13 Mile. I then surveyed the three suggested routes, the best of these being the line from Cottonvale. This route presents no great difficulties, and I believe it will be an asset to the area, as the district will become an important producer of fruit and vegetables in the next few years.
The Bentinck Tramway League, headed by Francis Bull, made a further deputation to the Acting Minister for Railways. Their efforts led to inspections in January 1919 by the Land Minister and in March 1919 by the Leader of the Opposition.
We soldier settlers are tired of being fobbed off. We have been settled on the most conveniently available Crown land at a most inconvenient distance from the main railway. The roads in the settlement are rough. A rail line is the obvious answer. We need this rail line desperately.
The Commissioner for Railways is hereby authorised to construct a tram line from Cotton Vale for 13 miles or so through the so-called 13-mile soldier settlement towards the state arsenic mines at Gibbon Bar.
As the proposed route from Cotton Vale lay in the Pikedale goldfield, an unsuccessful mining area that had been proclaimed in 1877, those who supported the soldier settlers' request used a loophole in the Mining Act of 1898. This act allowed tramways to be built to support mining by a simple administrative decision. This shortcut avoided the problems that were being experienced by regular government procedures. Under the tramway provisions of the Mining Act, the rail line was to be built as a 3-foot-6 gauge tramway to serve the Pikedale goldfield. The line was authorised by Cabinet on the 29th of May 1919, thus preventing the Legislative Council blocking its construction. Construction began in June 1919 when the Agent General turned the first sod. Alf Sell was foreman of one of the work teams.
Work began only about a year after the Tramway League's petition. Barney Cook was our resident engineer, and after a month there was 47 men hard at work on the line. We had our main camp at Cotton Vale. The surveyors had done a very good job avoiding any heavy work involved in clearing the big granite boulders that were all across this country. My gang were there at work clearing the land from Cotton Vale. We had Joe Nagel as our powder monkey if gelignite was required. Mr. Warren was in charge of the Toowola monkey grubber, a tree pulling winch. One day Mr. Warren even took a picture of Hedley Dempster, Jack Lump and me operating the monkey grubber. It was hard work using that winch, but it really saved a lot of harder graft.
Freight carried on the main line for construction of the Amiens line was given as grindstones, tools, gelignite, bags of axe handles, bags of pick handles, tents and flies, tanks, sleepers, 24 barrows, 2 buggy horses and rails at 7 and 6pence per tonne freight. Engineer Barney Cook kept an eye on progress.
By December of 1919 all the earthworks were complete, half of the sleeper blocks we needed had been cut and just over a mile of rail had been laid. The line was to be built with all possible economy, using 42-pound rails and earth packing instead of ballasting. As engineer, I was asked to estimate the likely traffic on the line. I reckoned it would most likely be way beyond the capacity of the motor tractor being built to serve the line. I told them that in the first year alone, there would be about 300 tonnes of spuds and 170 tonnes of orchard produce sent out from the farms. That motor they're building will only be able to take 2 wagons on that 1 in 50 grade. I saw no future at all in using that small motor.
The names of the 6 wayside stations were hotly debated. The surveyor, George Grant, suggested in a letter to the Governor-General on August the 18th, 1919,
As to the names of the wayside stations of the line, it is my suggestion that we adopt the names of notable battlefields in Gallipoli, France and Palestine. For the highest station on the line, I suggest Mont Saint-Quentin, where it may be truly said the Australians reached the highest point in their brilliant career.
Grant's principal idea was adopted, but was referred to the local member Donald Gunn, who suggested that the terminus should be named Diggerthorpe. His suggestion was not taken up with any enthusiasm. However, the names Fleurbay, Pozières, Bullecourt, Passchendaele, Bapaume, Messines and Romani were submitted to the Lands Department and the Postmaster General's Department. All were approved, with the exception of Romani, which the PMG thought could easily be confused with Roma. The eventual choice was Amiens. Meanwhile, work on the line continued.
It was a dry time, and so the teamsters had trouble delivering timber, as their horses would suffer. That meant the bridge building was delayed, and so 2 deviations were put in to avoid 2 of the bridges. They soon found that I was right about the motor tractor, and they started using B13 steam engines. We finished the work in good time, at a total cost of £40,000, and the line opened for traffic on the 7th of June 1920.
The official opening was performed by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, who was visiting Australia at the time. The opening took place on the 26th of July 1920. The special train that took him to Amiens was driven by Mr. Lister from Warwick.
The Prince got off the Royal train at Cottonvale and boarded a 2-carriage train hauled by my B13 engine. When we got to Amiens station, it was all decked out with golden wattle flowers, and there was a big crowd of all the farming people, who were thrilled to see the Prince. 200 or so diggers formed a guard of honour for the Prince when he disembarked to inspect the new township of Amiens. There were no turning facilities, so a pilot engine, another B13, ran down tender first to haul the Prince's train back to Cottonvale to join the Royal train on the main line. The trip took about an hour. I hope he enjoyed the view.
Surveyor Jack Meek remembered the visit of the Prince.
One of my earliest Stanthorpe memories is of a musical evening arranged to welcome Edward, Prince of Wales. It was during his 1920 Royal Tour, when Stanthorpe was included in the itinerary so that he could open the newly constructed Cottonvale-Amiens Railway on July the 26th, 1920, and meet the soldier settlers.
Do you remember when first I arrived at the soldiers' settlement block and saw the bark hut you'd built in the wilds and granite rock? It gave me quite a shock and almost filled me with despair. But I said, "Cheer up, dear, I'll soon make a nice home there."
Women were the backbone of the soldier settlement. The men could be away all day, or sometimes for days at a time, working for extra money to keep the family going. The women, many with young children, would be ploughing, planting, harvesting, sometimes only with their older children to help. It was a hard and often lonely life.
The sound of the train must have been such a comfort to a lot of those women who had come from crowded cities in Scotland or England. They came out to places like Pozieres, where there was very thick scrub and lots of silence. Even when they cleared a few acres for farming, it still left a lot of bush. And those women who were used to seeing people all the time, when they went shopping to get their half a dozen eggs or their bread, well, they were suddenly pitchforked into an area where you couldn't even see where the neighbours lived. And if they had little kids, walking a mile through the bush wasn't easy, so they were very isolated. When that train line went through, just the very sound of it, huffing and puffing as it went along, must have been the most wonderful sound for the women to hear, because they knew there was someone else there.
The bush is strange to me and wild, so far from everything I've known. Can't tell my sorrow to the child, but the whistle sings to me of home. I plough the rows, plant and hoe, work all day in the sun and rain, reminding me I'm not alone is the cheerful sound whistling train, the cheerful sound of the whistling train. Life on the land is a lonely life. There's always so much work to do. Now I'm a farmer and a wife, and it's the land I'm wedded to. I plough the rows, plant and hoe, work all day in the sun and rain, reminding me I'm not alone is the cheerful sound of the whistling train, the cheerful sound